What do you believe the consequences for Iran should be?
That remains to be seen. Thank you.
The United States is weighing its options after Iran launched dozens of missiles toward Israel. But the Biden administration is promising severe consequences. The U.S. helped Israel shoot down the missiles, which Iran says was retaliation for the death of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and other militants. The CBC's Paul Hunter joins us now from Washington. So, Paul, what do we know about the U.S. response, what their plans might be at this point? What do we know so far?
Well, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan put it best, describing this moment from a U.S. perspective as being in the fog of war right now, a very fluid situation, and one the U.S. is following, as he put it, minute by minute in talks with Israel, as all sides are trying to assess what played out today. But the attack was described by the White House as brazen, unacceptable, and a significant escalation by Iran. The big question, as put to Joe Biden in your intro there to me, what's the U.S. going to do? You heard his answer. That remains to be seen. The Biden administration has made clear there would be consequences. It reiterated that today, but went no further. We know both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were in the Situation Room as the strike on Israel played out. Biden said at that spray in the Oval Office he hadn't at that time spoken with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but that he would be. We also know the U.S. just this week announced it's sending a few thousand more troops to the region, along with fighter jets and other warplanes. The giant concern, of course, being not only that a broader war breaks out in the Middle East, but that the U.S. gets drawn into it. As Biden so often underlines, Israel has no stronger ally than the U.S. But look, these are fraught times for that relationship. Israel has lately been acting militarily without advising the U.S., including with the killing last week, as you noted, of Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah, which is believed to have been the spark for this attack by Iran. The discussions with Israel ongoing right now likely begin with what's Israel going to do now? How might it respond? When might it do so? What would that look like? All of them hypotheticals U.S. officials explicitly did not wade in on today.
Look, Paul, there's never an easy time to deal with something like this, but this comes at an especially complicated time for the U.S., right in the middle of the election campaign. So how is this playing out in the campaign?
Yeah, super complicated time on this front, as the Biden administration, and by extension, the Democratic nominee to replace him, Vice President Kamala Harris, have at times, been struggling to publicly support Israel without distancing themselves from Palestinian civilians caught in the middle of Israel's continuing response to the October 7th attacks by Hamas. Huge election issue in many quarters of this country, especially a place like Michigan, one of the big battleground states we talk about so often, and one with a huge Arab American and Muslim American population. Kamala Harris herself went before cameras late this afternoon to speak to what happened today. Here's some of what she said.
Iran is not only a threat to Israel, Iran is also a threat to American personnel in the region, American interests, and innocent civilians across the region who suffer at the hands of Iran-based and backed terrorist proxies. We will never hesitate to take whatever action is necessary to defend U.S. forces and interests against Iran and Iran-backed terrorists. And we will continue to work with our allies and partners to disrupt Iran's aggressive behavior and hold them accountable.
Harris notably not straying from White House messaging on that today. Republican nominee Donald Trump, on the other hand, chose to politicize the Iran attack, slamming Biden and Harris for, in his words, not knowing what's going on, and describing his view of the strike by Iran this way.
As you know, the world right now is spiraling out of control. I've been talking about World War III for a long time, and I don't want to make predictions because the predictions always come true. We're not going to make, but they are very close to global catastrophe. We have a non-existent president and a non-existent vice president who should be in charge, but nobody knows what's going on.
At the end of the day, David, politics aside, the issue for the U.S. is what will it do next on this? The bottom line from the White House, again, there will be consequences, severe consequences. That's a quote, but it went no further.
All right, Paul, thank you so much. That's the CBC's Paul Hunter in Washington. Well, Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mélanie Joly, says she condemns Iran's attack unequivocally. But she also says when she contacted her Israeli counterpart, they had different messages.
So he reiterated his own position, which is basically Israel's right to defend itself. and that has been his position since. And so, and our position has been since that, of course, we need a ceasefire and we need this war to stop.
So what kind of retaliation is Israel considering, and how is it balancing its own security goals with fears from allies of a broader regional war? Iddo Moed is Israel's ambassador to Canada, and he's here with me again tonight. Ambassador, it's good to see you. Thank you for coming here today.
Thank you for having me, David.
I wonder if we could start with the latest on the situation in Israel. It appears that the air defenses of Israel, and with help from the United States, averted mass casualties. There were some reports of injuries and deaths. What's the latest information you have on the situation?
I would like to share with you just an image that took place here in Ottawa while this barrage was falling into Israel. Myself and my colleagues at the embassy were standing in front of the screen watching Israeli TV, seeing those missiles going into the homes of our families. It's horrendous. It's just incredible. We have to imagine that 180 missiles, hypersonic missiles flying overhead and falling into the ground. So we know that just a few people got injured. We know of one casualty in Jericho, a Palestinian probably killed by one of the interceptor missiles. A school was hit, and that's the extent of damage that we know at this point in time. We know that there are no further casualties, and we are very fortunate to have had this air dome defense system, the support of the United States and other countries in the region, all of which understand very clearly that Iran poses a threat not just to Israel, but to the whole region and far beyond that.
Right, the Palestinian man who was killed in Jericho, that appears to have been shrapnel from interceptor missiles hitting the ballistic missiles, and just a tragic accident that it fell out of the sky and struck him. But I wonder now, the concern, I mean, the world is holding its breath, Ambassador, about what the response looks like, right? You've heard this from all the allies, but we've heard from the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations saying that it will be noticed and it will hurt. How far is Israel prepared to go, do you think, in responding to what Iran did today?
Well, I'll not go into details about operational plans, but I would say this. You're saying the world is holding its breath. We need the world to breathe. We need the world to be focused, to be concentrated, and to stand together. And this is our call also to Canada. As Parliament is deliberating this evening in a special debate about Lebanon, I think that the call that should come out from Canada, Canada that already designated the RGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, as a terrorist organization under criminal law, the message should be this will not be tolerated. The free world will not accept that. So if we want to avert a war, a further escalation, the most important thing that the international community can do right now is to stand up and make a very strong voice to Iran, call Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps a terrorist organization like Canada did, call out more sanctions to debilitate Iran's capability to further develop its nuclear program, its terrorist aims, its missile program. We've discussed this before. The missiles reach far beyond Israel. Mm-hmm. Israel is not the only target. Iran has a scope of much further, that goes much further than Israel and the Middle East. And that's why it's a global threat. And this is why the free world should unite right now and stand up against Iran so this can be averted.
I don't know if we'll see any of the countries we normally speak to on the show standing up with Iran. I think they've all recognized it as a proxy or a sponsor of state terror and describing it in the terms that you've just outlined. Certainly Canada has and America. But there is a call for a ceasefire. And I know that's always seemed difficult throughout the past 11 months since we first met. And never has it seemed more difficult, to me at least, than right now when it seems completely at odds with the stated intentions and the self-interest in terms of national security for your government based on what they've said about today. So where do you think this goes next? Because there is a concern that if Israel strikes back and strikes too hard, Iran will strike back again, and then it just spirals out of control from there.
So the way we see it, again, is different. It's not a tit for tat. These are not two countries that just exchange fire and, like little kids fighting. Mm-hmm. There is a state, a regime, the Iranian regime, that declared very clearly, we will eliminate the state of Israel. We will wipe it off the map. And they are doing that. So calling for a ceasefire is futile if the side that has developed that mechanism, that has these proxies in Yemen, in Syria, in Lebanon, of course, in Iraq, and Iran itself, if this machinery that was put in place, that is weaponized, that is carrying out these orders from Iran, if they will not stop, nothing will stop. Israel did not start a war on the 7th of October. We have to remember that. So saying no more war is fine, but we don't want a war, but it's forced upon us. And if Iran is shooting and destroying the northern part of Israel just out of fun because they want to join the war in Gaza and they use Hezbollah for that, we will not allow Hezbollah to continue. It's incumbent on the international community to implement the Security Council Resolution 1701 and 1559, demilitarizing this zone and pushing away any kind of militias that are not the Lebanese army. The Lebanese army is welcome to stay there, and this is the agreement. But so far, over 20, almost 20 years, 18 years, this has not been implemented. So calling out to say, well, let's not have a war, that's fine, but on what terms? What kind of security can Israel have that Iran will not attack it, that the Houthis will not attack it, that Hezbollah will not attack it, that Hamas, they're all attacking Israel on their own initiative. So I understand the call to stop the war. It's important, but it's very naive. At this point in time, the message, the only message that will work is a very strong, unified message, not only condemning Iran, but taking measures and steps to show the regime there that whatever the goals that they want to pursue, that will not succeed because the international community will not accept that.
Well, what sort of measures and steps are we talking here? Because it sounds like, and I've seen a number of Israeli Defense Forces spokespeople today and heard the commentary from your government. It sounds like a military strike inside Iran is almost certainly going to happen as a response to today. I mean, that is a fair assumption on my part. You would agree?
I'm not a military. You've heard other people say that. That's.
But do you think your government, because they will make the decision, the political echelon is the phrase that the IDF was using today, will make the decision. Do you think it goes as far, Ambassador, as hitting their nuclear program, hitting their oil facilities, or does this strictly stay as a military targeted operation? Where could this go, I guess?
Where we want to go is to signal the best, the strongest possible signal to the Iranian regime. This must stop now. This cannot continue any further. This is the signal that we have to have the Iranian regime understand. Their nuclear program, their missile program, their terrorism program, their ideology, religious fundamentalist ideology, the human rights abuse, all of that must be stopped. Iran is a threat to the region. Iran is a threat to the world. Iran downed an airplane carrying 100 Canadians. Yep. We have to remember that. Iran has been using social media here in Canada at McGill University, and the same has been doing in U.S. Universities. We have to understand that this is a threat that is not there because Israel did something here or there. It's because this regime has an agenda which is contrary to our very fundamental values as a free society. And if we don't protect ourselves, they will continue to spread it.
I know you say it's not tit for tat, right? But they did what they did today. They say in response to what the IDF did with getting Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut with the attack last week. Your government and the United States have vowed consequences, which implies some sort of a military response. And then the Iranian armed forces said if Israel responds to the Iranian attack, it will be met with vast destruction of its infrastructure. So it sounds like the cycle may persist when Israel does decide to respond to what Iran did today.
Again, what we are looking for, our goal is to make the regime of Iran understand that their goals will not be attained. And it's impossible for them to do that. This is our goal, and we'll take any measures that are necessary. But at this specific moment, what we are calling for to the international community, stand with us to defend the free world, because Iran is using whatever pretext. Today it will be because of this, tomorrow it will be something else. I mean, this whole war started because Iran armed and financed and built this machinery. They have constructed the framework. They built the stage for this war for years and years and years. So now that's the stage that we are playing on the Iranian stage that they placed in front of us, where they want to destroy the state of Israel, they want to destabilize other countries in the region, and they want to reach far beyond that. And if we fail to understand that, Iran has put an infrastructure in place which is extremely deadly and dangerous for the rest of the world, if we don't act against that, then this will continue.
Melanie Joly, the Foreign Affairs Minister, said today that on Wednesday of last week, she went to bed convinced she was going to wake up to a ceasefire. And there have been indications from Prime Minister Netanyahu and others to Western leaders, maybe even the president, that they were optimistic about signing whatever was on the table as part of the hostage for a ceasefire negotiations that were happening. And since then, we've had the strike that killed Hassan Nasrallah, we've had the incursion into Lebanon, and now the Iranian retaliation and this escalation. I mean, is a ceasefire even remotely possible under these circumstances, Ambassador? It seems less and less likely the closer we get to the anniversary of October 7th.
I would say that a ceasefire with the devil is something that is very, very hard to grasp and to understand. We are actually dealing with an entity that is extremely dangerous, that is not reliable, that has never kept its word, that is not shying away from the worst of atrocities against anybody at any point in time. So we have to be very careful when we are wishing for a ceasefire, which will actually allow those terrorists to rearm, to regroup, and to continue their attacks. And this is our major concern when we stop the firing at this moment and say, well, let's just wait and see what they do. I mean, the whole issue of the deal for the hostages. There are 101 hostages being held for a year in the dungeons, in the tunnels in Gaza. And I really didn't hear anybody, international community, really, getting out of their comfort zone and really working to attain that, to reach that, to get that deal done. This is the most prevalent issue on Israelis' minds right now. Everywhere you look in Israel, you'll see these yellow armbands, and you'll see, the orange tie. Whatever you'll see, you'll understand that everybody wants to have our hostages back. This is where we are. We are under attack. We have to understand that this trauma that's been inflicted on us didn't cause us just to go out on a rampage of revenge. What we want to attain is a new situation in the Middle East, and actually right now we are on the brink of a potential positive change in the Middle East, where parties come together and form a new alliance that will push away these evil forces.
We're also potentially on the brink of a wider war, right? This started with the operations in Gaza, now what you're calling limited operations into southern Lebanon, where there have been strikes in Beirut, and now we have this escalation with Iran. Just as a final point, I mean, how close do you think we are to this escalating to a more difficult level?
Israel is there for peace. We've always reached out our hand in peace. We are defending ourselves. You see this barrage. Do you see what has been happening here in the last few years? Israel has developed the most advanced missile defense system, while the other side has been developing the most advanced missile attack system. So if you ask me today or on October the 6th, I'll give you the same answer. We want peace. We don't want to fight a war, but we understand that we have adversaries, we have enemies that will not accept our existence in the region. So we have to be prepared, but if the opportunity arises, and I think there is an opportunity here to reshape the Middle East, we'll grasp it with both hands and create a new reality that will work for the prosperity of everyone.
Ambassador, I always appreciate the time. This is Israel's ambassador to Canada, Iddo Moed.
Thank you for having me.